The Progressive Era by Murray Rothbard, edited by Patrick Newman, narrated by Graham Wright. Foreword by Andrew Napolitano. Chapter 4. The Third Party System, Pietists versus Liturgicals. How could America experience a great leap into statism after 1900, a leap that went virtually unchallenged? What happened to the long-standing American tradition of individual liberty and laissez-faire? How could it so meekly roll over and play dead after having been dominant, or at least vibrant, during the last half of the 19th century and for over half a century before that? To answer this question, we must explore what the new political historians, in the past decade, have been analysing as the sudden end of the third party system in the United States in the year 1896. It was that sudden collapse that spelled the doom of laissez-faire in American party politics and paved the way for the unchallenged statism of the Progressive period, and indeed for the remainder of the 20th century. The first party system began in the 1790s, when the Democratic-Republican Party was launched in order to combat the Federalist program of economic statism: high tariffs, public works, centralized government, public debt, government control of banking, and cheap money, and of repressive federal tyranny against democratic critics in the press. The Democratic Republicans also strove to end the ultimate control of the government by a judicial oligarchy, and to end militarism by abolishing the Navy and standing army. After winning with Thomas Jefferson's assumption to the presidency in 1800 and partially achieving their platform, the Democratic Republicans faltered, and then themselves began to go down the road to federalism by driving toward war with their ancient foe, Great Britain. The pro-British Federalists were effectively destroyed for opposing the War of 1812, but their programme was put into effect by their foes in the course of launching and fighting a necessarily statist war. High protective tariffs, federal domestic excise taxation, a central bank, inflationary bank credit expansion, public debt, public works, and, to boot, a one-party system by the end of the war. Brooding in retirement at Monticello, Jefferson lamented at what his Virginia successors to the presidency, James Madison and James Monroe, had wrought. They had ended by installing a one-party federalism without the Federalists. Being human, Jefferson was not as keenly alive to his own crucial role in launching the drive toward war, and therefore toward the very federalism that he so bitterly deplored. Inspired and converted by separate weekend pilgrimages to Monticello, two important young politicians, Thomas Hart Benton of Missouri and especially Martin Van Buren of New York, determined to take up the mighty task of creating a new political party, a party designed to take back America from federalism and to restore the good old principles of '76, the American Revolution and the Declaration of Independence, and of '98, of the Kentucky and Virginia resolutions, which called for a virtual revolution of states against the despotic national alien and sedition laws. Basing themselves in New York, Missouri, and on the old Jeffersonians in Virginia, the new party sought a charismatic leader and found him in Andrew Jackson. The new Democratic Party was born, dedicated to personal liberty, minimal government, free trade, hard money, and the separation of government from banking. The opposition Whigs revived the nationalist statist Federalist program, except that the Whigs were more interested in compulsory morality and restricting the flood of immigrants, and adopted demagogic democratic techniques and rhetoric, in contrast to the frankly elitist and anti-universal suffrage and anti-democratic outlook of the Federalist Party. It should be noted that in both of the first two party systems, the libertarian laissez-faire party slowly but surely began to establish itself as the dominant majority party in America. The Federalists faded with the triumph of Jefferson, but Jeffersonian principles could not survive the drive that he himself had launched toward war. In the second party system, too, the Democrats began to establish themselves as the majority party, and it seemed once again as if America would move rapidly toward the libertarian, laissez-faire ideal. On the federal level, the quite feasible Jacksonian plan was to have 8 years of Jackson, 8 of Van Buren, and 8 of Benton. 24 solid years in which to achieve their goals. 8 years of Jackson from 1828 to 1836 was indeed succeeded by 4 years of Van Buren. Then the timetable was briefly interrupted by the victory of the first modern demagogic presidential campaign, replete with all the propaganda techniques we are now familiar with. Slogans, parades, buttons, all engineered by the master Whig political technician Thurlow Weed. But everyone knew that the Democrats, who could easily copy these techniques 4 years later, would win in 1844, and Van Buren prepared to resume the victorious timetable. But then the great issue of the expansion of slavery came to split the Democratic Party, in the form of admission of Texas to the Union as a slave state, and Jackson and Van Buren also split on the issue. While the Democrats remained Jacksonian in most matters, Jacksonianism was pushed to the background as the Democrats became a Southern-based, pro-slave party. The Republican Party, including some Northern Democrats, was then founded in the 1850s to become the party opposed to slave expansion, and then in the Civil War to uphold the unitary power of the National Union as against the right of state secession. The Third American Party System had begun. The Republican Party, which only got 40% of the popular vote in 1860, seized the opportunity presented by the South's walkout and the resulting near one-party Congress to ram through the old Whig economic program: inflationary paper money, central control over banking, high tariffs, massive government subsidies to railroads, high federal excise taxation over the immoral commodities, liquor and cigarettes, plus such centralizing and statist measures as conscription and the income tax. It is no wonder that the Republicans should have been dominant during and immediately after the war in the Reconstruction period. The Democrats were slowly gaining the ascendancy, so that, as happened at the end of the two previous party systems, the Democratic Party was slowly but inexorably moving toward long-run dominance. This development was embodied in the Democratic landslide to capture the House in 1890, and in Cleveland's easy return to a second term in the presidency in 1892, which carried the Democrats to control both houses of Congress for the first clean sweep since the Civil War. And then something happened to clobber the Democratic Party in 1896, and to reduce it to a rather pathetic minority party, at least until 1912, and more accurately until 1928, since Woodrow Wilson's election in 1912 was only made possible by a grave split within Republican ranks. What cataclysmic event occurred in 1896, so much so as to usher in a new fourth-party system for the next 32 years, will be the subject of the next few chapters.